Okay, let's get into prevising. So prevising, now that this is kind of a lot of ways what I see is where the story making and writing happens inside Unreal. So what we've done since then is we've built our environments, and we've and this I'm showing you a little bit because there's different methods, different times. Like this was starting as we were developing each part, so you'll see things are less finessed as we go, and things have changed from the final edit. And the beauty of this is to help find your story. So how I look at prevising in Unreal, when you're trying to make a story, is it's kind of fleshing out what your story is, based on your premise and where you can go in and edit. And we'll get into editing in the next chapter. But here, so the idea here is that the previous here was to kind of like showcase now the version that this is, and we see this is our ship coming in. It was a slow kind of burn, like they had a different robot. So this is earlier days. So even though we were building all that stuff, like I said, our sandbox, and a lot of it was, you'll see as we go, is fleshed out. It wasn't finished. And I'll talk about how this changed where the story went. So my first, idea was just, start off the eye, and then we're in space, like nebulas, all that cool stuff, pan down, and we see a ship coming in. We're kind of just drifting along in space, kind of like slow and ambient, and have some cool sound effects. This is fun. It was kind of reminding me a little bit of like the original or Alien 2, James Cameron's, where you're just kind of following the ship at the beginning, where it's kind of just cool space. Now, and here, I wanted to have some character we started with. So we changed it out obviously later on. This was just kind of a start, but because it was to give me an idea of like, oh, I'm going to put something cool here, maybe a couple of things. Part of this is to give her the character a personality. So we feel like this person in here is not just a drone or something like that. That she actually has a character. So there's a bit of her life in here. Now this was, again, like I said, as you see, like we just went through in the lighting phase, where it was a lot more elaborate inside here with a T-Rex and a cooler robot and a bunch of other stuff and postcards and all kinds of things. That's what I knew I was going to do. This was just kind of a sketch. So I look at it this as sketching. So we pan around, we see her, and this is actually before we finished texturing her. So you can see early on we were doing this, but this is like the first mocap that was put in. This was just some of the even the eye movement, all this stuff was early days, and it really didn't matter. It was, and this story here too, she was actually having a conversation with somebody. So this is why it looks like she's actually talking, because there's someone else that she's talking to, and the story changed a little bit. It was basically like someone giving her advice about like a mission, and she was going to go. She was like, "Well, I really want to go home. This is like, I was on my way home and blah, blah, blah." And the person from a control center or whatever is just saying, "Hey, we have this one more mission, just go." And then it becomes something where she's trapped there. That changed, but that's what's great about this, is that you work out your story in this form. But a lot of this, so this initial mocap that was done on our body, some of this was utilized. I changed it quite a bit, and the timing, because we had so many takes of Christopher that actually played this character in the suit, and so there's different moments, and then the eye movement and all that stuff was just using my iPhone, using the iRig and using your iPhone app, and it was just a placeholder. I knew we were going to go back and redo it, and actually keyframed all the eye stuff later on, and gave it, because you get a lot more control. So So this was just, what was interesting is this was more of this conversation, even her looking out at space and just, contemplating like about like, I really uh, don't want to do this mission. I want to go home. I've been out here too long. And then this guy she's talking to is basically telling her like, if you just finish this, you'll be able to go home right afterwards. But think of the money and the vacation afterwards. And so she decides to take this journey. And this is before we did the matte painting. But what was fascinating about like this process is, is that was originally what I thought. That's where I wrote it. And so fleshing out and doing the previs early on helped me understand what that story was going to be. Interesting enough, this didn't change that much. It just added more detail. Like, so this is earlier, before there was all the lightning, before there was all the kind of cool effects that were going on, and even the ship itself, there's no, but this is still like, so you can imagine like some of the stuff was just more enhancing and I kept as they went. But what this really told me is that the story was working in places, with some places, and other places it wasn't. Again, she's not textured at this time, and then this was not finished, but the ship coming in, we didn't have this, the exhaust coming off the ship or anything like that yet. But this, it's previs. So she lands, she turns everything off. We have these other angles that I was playing with, but ultimately didn't like. There was things about this that just, like this camera movement here was just god awful. But you have to like go through that early on to figure out like what works. But what was interesting is this previs, or I mean the mocap that we did, even her walking and stuff like that, none of that changed. So even early days of doing previs, after we started building out all this stuff, and like the ship was still being worked on. That was an earlier ship. This was the other part of this whole thing here. Drone was still being worked on, but it was close. But my camera angles, this is what's funny. It's like, it's like you really start to play around and go, okay, I'm going to showcase this character. How do I show her? Like I wanted to start off on, part of the drone because that's the focus that she's going towards, and then expose, then she comes into play, and then we follow her. I ended up going, I changed the lens and also changed, so it wasn't like, I went to a more this is, I think, a 30 or something like that. I went to a 50 or 60, so it's closer to her. And you get that kind of cool, like, not distortion that's happening here. But I was just playing around. And again, it's all about experimenting. And so this is her, like, this is even before we actually finished her suit. I mean, her suit, but also her case. So it was an old, this welder right here was based on, before was, we were just, before we made the welder, then just used something, I think it was from a District 9 kind of an asset, one of their guns, just because it kind of looked cool and it looked like a tool more than a weapon. But they were just placeholders, at the time. But what I thought was kind of cool and fascinating about this was it really helped me figure out, and again, like these cameras, like it's funny, it's like the lenses here, like, are just way too wide, they're like, it's doing, it's, even though I want to be kind of close to that, it's like, it's making you feel really almost sick. It's not good, but that's part of it. So it was great to kind of like flesh this out, first pass, kind of get an idea where things are going. But the idea is we're looking around, she looks up, same kind of action that we have in the final, and she sees that the orb's kind of been ripped out. She's like looking around like, oh, where'd it go? Where the hell could it have gone? Looks over at that cave. It's like, oh, maybe that's where it's at. I guess I'm going to go explore. So even this whole thing, where she's opening up her case and all that stuff and puts it down. We like limited all this because it was not necessary. And then we had a shot like this that we just decided it's not necessary too, where it's like she comes in, she looks at things, picks things up as she's getting close to the cave, puts it down. But what was really cool about this is this didn't take long at all to do this previous, because like I said, we went through the process. We're building. We had her built. We did the mocap, even though a lot of stuff was temp, like her welder, and the lighting wasn't complete or anything like that. But what it did is it kind of helped answer, like, is this my story? Is this the story I want to tell? And so this gets all the way to where she goes into the cave itself, and she's about to explore. So what's in the cave? We start hearing things, and um, she starts hearing howling and all kinds of weird stuff, and just it was a great this. So this was the beginning of the Previs. So it was like just the beginning. The first half is what at the time is what I was calling this, but it answered a lot of questions. So from here we actually started to think about what that story is, what worked, what didn't, and this felt too slow at the beginning. We wanted to really get into it, so we sped that up. The story here of a person that's actually given her. Uh, um, Kind of a guiding her or giving her like, hey, this is your last mission before your vacation or something like that. All that left, we got rid of that and started thinking about, okay, what could that be? All right, so let's see if this particular one, if this is closer. Well, this is just getting more fleshed out. So this is where I started to put. I think it was still same thing, but I started to think, okay, I want to tell what this is. So we know it's the maintenance vessel. Started to add more textures. Now we started to add like these other components that you're seeing. They're not finished, the lighting and all that stuff, but I was starting to flesh it out more. There's little things, details here. She's still not finished texture-wise, you can see, but this is when we actually changed it. So you saw the one before where she was getting a message from somebody else she was talking to. Now she's getting a scrambled message from something else that we find out later on is actually her giving herself a message. It's kind of a weird loop. It's a Twilight Zone type of story. So, but we don't know that, so we distort it, and it's basically like her job is to fix down drones. So when she gets this, it's basically it's a message about a down drone. Here's the coordinates, blah blah blah. But then we find out later on she's the one that sent that. But she doesn't know that yet. So here now we can see it. Now that this particular previs, we're starting to flesh out more. Now introducing the matte painting. And now this is probably pretty much the same. Hasn't changed too much at this point, but maybe added some lightning here and there. I think that's probably the only thing that changed. It just advanced because we had this whole thing where she's like looking down at the drone. Started to add like some kind of effects here coming off really bad, but early days. And just slowly starting to add like the lightning and other kind of effects in there. So the story, like I said, has changed from where we were. So then we, from being told by basically our character, someone off like from mission control or something like that, saying, hey, you got a mission. This is her getting a message from this planet or something like that. And so she's investigating. And going to fix it. So this is a better camera angle, like I felt to start off with, and also I wanted to, this is where we decide that this planet has its own kind of intelligent life form. And the life form is something that can mess with time itself. And so having this, and also I want to kind of show that this planet's not lifeless. So this is a way to introduce her coming off the ship, kind of walking, but also go out of focus. And in the foreground, we have this little creature. And the creature gets engulfed by something and then all of a sudden returns right back where it was. And so that gave us a hint that something was off. That was the idea with that. We had these other angles that I abandoned later on. It felt too swirly and all that stuff. And then our close-ups, again, she's not finished, didn't light it, yet. So this is all Still early days, but this was getting closer. It was like, moving around. Our lens is closer to a 50, which is good. So it doesn't have that weird fisheye quality. But it was telling the story of her now trying to really discover what's going on. So this is getting closer to where we end up going. And then we still had this where she's opening her case, which was just kind of abandoned some of this. Then we had these other, kept this, moment, because for some reason I thought it's like the details to help us, describe that there's something in this cave is directing her, because the pieces around from the drone or inside. The rest of it, the orb must be in there. That basically is the orb, the eye is basically going to, she thinks is going to at least give her information of what happened. How did it go down? She also needs to fix it, so she needs to find it if it's something that she can pull out. So this is getting closer again to where we end up going, and then there's like an effect here that we polish later on. But this effect here was same thing we saw in the bug, but it's kind of engulfed her. So now we know the idea that there's something about to happen to her. So this is, we follow her through. We have the cave shot that we showed before that we lit later, and we changed the design and stuff a bit. And also a bunch of other cuts and angles in here. Like this, the idea of this, the intention was this is the creature's POV, perhaps. It's interesting too, because you start to put this together, you start to realize what's important, what do you need, what becomes kind of distracting, and that was one of them. So this was following her, similar to what we end up with. That gets a little, see that cut there is a little weird too. So it's like, coming in from here and then all of a sudden coming in from here. It's like, it's very confusing. So we got rid of that angle altogether. So here again, we're starting to flesh out the story. I want to minimize this later on because I felt like, again, we're coming back here, but the idea is that this is creature POV. Creature's over here hiding or something like that. We can hear it. There's something, but she's not aware of it. This is her watching the clip, which is basically which we hear more of anything, and we see later on. We show you a little bit, but it's like it's all distorted, so she can't make out the fact that it's actually her. Later on, that comes back to this. All right, so she's hears something, she's being chased, and all this stuff was, working for us for the most part. But then, and then we see the ship. It feels, it's not as moody as where we went later on. It was like, it almost like you can see too much sky. So, where we were going later, and we'll talk about that in the final, is like, is that this whole planet can change time, whatever this life form is, and it's kind of a way of protecting itself from basically predators. And so it can also change time of rocks and formation. So this whole thing, there's one, and it might be in one of these versions that I'll show you, is that it ends up becoming, we see it kind of engulf the ship itself and close up, and no sun's there. So this is her like looking around. She finds like the little robot, which later would change to Rex because she talks to Rex. So it made sense that it should be the Rex character. And then it was like, this was a setup for the creature, and it was like, this is the first attempt of it. It was too bright, and it's like, why wouldn't she notice it there? And, this is the big fight, but that's her shooting it, but we didn't have the effect yet. But all this stuff, again, it helps tell the story. It's very, very important when creating the previs and working in this method, is that you're fleshing out what works, what story, camera angles, how you tell your story, what the cuts are going to be, and then that's the creature waking up, and then her like bailing. It's like, I'm getting out, and you see the creature over there starting to lift up. She shot it, but it just stunned it. Now she's trying to run to get out. She doesn't know where to go, but she hears it coming. So she hides behind this, rock, looks back. Is it coming? Is it coming? Where's it? And then she takes off. And I realized that was kind of not necessary. So later on, I cut that out. Again, it's important to flesh all this stuff out. So this is her running through, and a lot of these, finally finding the exit and going, it's like, okay, great. This is a cool shot. I ended up not going with it, but I thought it was kind of a cool angle. I just had too many angles. That's the thing. So, but that was part of it. And then we see the creature coming out. It's like, holy crap! What is it doing? Why is its arms all weird? Which was kind of an experiment to play with it, to make it like kind of funky. But I realized, and even here, it's like it's kind of coming towards her. I just felt like, and we can see it she's inside the ship now. We can see it starting to climb onto the ship. And this is the anomaly or whatever like that, the life form. We can now see it engulf the drone, and then also the creature pops up. It's like, oh my god, and then it disappears, and the creature drops off. The ship takes off. The creature runs away because it doesn't want to get turned into a time loop of some sort, which it probably already has. And then all of a sudden, coming out of the time loop is the drone that hits the ship. So the idea is that this thing is opening and closing all over the planet. So it engulfed this drone, and then this was, it's kind of confusing here. So that's why a lot of stuff is kind of. But I want to showcase in this where the drone falls and falls and falls, and we see how it got to where it was, where it ends up, and now this eye, the orb's missing. We saw it in the air, and then that's it falling. We see this thing engulf and change the rocks here. We see the ship now crashed, her ship, and she's trying to figure out what's, how to get out of here. What the hell happened? What did she just hit? And I lost all this stuff too because I didn't really need it. This is her coming out. Going, holy shit. So the idea she's trying to figure out how to get out of here, and she realizes that there's where she's at all of a sudden. She realizes, well, there's that orb that I saw before that I can probably radio, because the idea is that her radio's down inside, so she can't communicate to anybody to get off the planet. So she finds the orb again, comes up to it, looking around to figure out wow, is there anyone else in here? She goes in to turn the thing, on so she can actually record. And this is where she records herself, kind of a mayday call. This is, obviously it's putting up here so as a reminder. And we hear the complete message, and this is, her basically telling herself, and now we see herself in the ship getting the message, but can't quite hear and understand. And then she gets attacked by the creature. She's dead. And it becomes a time loop. So all that actually, seemed to work story-wise for us. And for me, it was just the fact that now it was to figure out pacing, timing, and what worked, what didn't. And so this was really helpful. And this didn't take long to create, because all these elements, like I said, were built. We built the caves, we built the world. We built her, and she was being finessed as we were going. The ships are still being finessed as we were going, but all this stuff got replaced and updated as we went. But this answered just 100 questions. All right, so that kind of gets into the previs. I think let's see the last previs if there's anything different with that. So this one was just playing around. So this is the last of the previs before it started to become final, where I started to come up with the eye galaxy. The eye galaxy was, so there's a combination, the eye has multiple purposes in this. Part of it was this all takes place in the eye galaxy, which is going to be, my Twilight Zone, that all kinds of weird stuff happens in, and this would be a series, and the episode was Calanthek. So that was the thinking behind this, but And I still had the ship coming through. We started to have it now update with some of the textures and, and even the name of the ship on the side, which is my initials and my age. So there you go. That's how you get, clever names. You just Aaron Gregory Sims, 55 years old. There you go. And so ended up changing this out because this was still a little too slow for some people. When I showed it, they wanted to just kind of get right into it, make it a little bit more, punchy. Now this is, starting to get more into the textures. Now this is the Previs where she started to get textured, which is really kind of cool and exciting. So now our helmet and everything has cool textures on it. The lighting is too dark in here, and that was part of it. This started to put some voiceover in here, finessing this. Not much change there, but that gets finessed later. But things were just starting to get polished. So this is like, third round. This is another angle starting to mess around. This is finessing this a bit more. Still went with these weird angles here, which I abandoned later in the final. Still working on, but this angle kind of, obviously kept with. Just made it a bit moodier in the end because it looked a little flat, but a lot of stuff kept the same. So this is starting to flesh out closer to what the final was. And each one of these made it closer to what the story I wanted to tell. Decided to get rid of this stuff, but later, but everything's started to get polished. And it was starting to, the cut was getting closer, which is cool. And this is when we started to add her seeing what's actually in the recording, which we can't make out. It's just this kind of distorted image of something, and it's getting attacked. And it's like, oh shit, what was that? And then she hears something, and it's like, hey, wait, there's something over there. Is there? This is weird. I got to get the hell out of here. So this were like playing around with other angles too, and other ways to reveal. This is her running again, and it gets a little. There was a couple things that I decided that they're cool visuals, but they just didn't fit the story. So this whole thing of her running, out of that room, just didn't feel like it was necessary. So I ended up abandoning that. But and then this is like an older. I think it's just probably because we weren't finished. This just plopped into the edit, the older stuff. And this was starting to finesse this shot a bit more. This is way too lit. Obviously, it's like daytime and stuff, but it was kind of cool just because it started to like flesh out this action scene a bit more, and then start adding effects to it too, like from the gun. And each time we got closer, like, with each previs, it was just closer to being more of the final product. Part of that helped is, starting to get better lighting, better textures. I still like that angle, but it's like I ended up abandoning that. There's too many angles here, so it was like, still the attack happens. Everything's pretty much the same. There's a couple of different angles here, like, kind of flying the creature, or the ship flying over us, which is kind of cool. And seeing the exhaust come up, but it was like, I, changed that out. And again, I was trying to make it less choppy with the edits. Her, hitting the drone, then falling and crashing. And I still kept this in at this point just because I thought, well, maybe I'll just keep, but it just got confusing. Pulled all this out, and that's also showing like the eye kind of falling and then where it came from, how it got in there, which I thought was kind of cool, but then it just became a bit unnecessary in the edit later on when we started polishing it and getting into the final. And this is her like in the crash and, kind of doing the same thing, walking out, coming up, trying different approaches towards the eye. This is close to her mocap to what she was doing. This is also her communicating, recording herself, and then, that becomes the thing where she sees herself and the creature gets her and blah, blah, blah. Credits. And this was a way like to try to figure out, like putting this in is like, okay, figure out how long it's going to be. It's around, like right now it's around 10 minutes of the whole thing, and that's where we kind of, I think we got it down to 9. But so that's basically the Previs. That's the story part of the Calanthek is previsiting your story as you go. Is how I see it is writing your story. Okay, so that takes care of this part. I'm going to jump into editing right now. So how do we put all these pieces together? So this is kind of give you an overview of my thinking and the process of prevising everything out. Let's get into editing and that process. All right.